All this time, I thought there was something wrong with me, when really, it was recognizing the absence of emotional connection and support from my parents, which essentially led me down a path of unhealthy patterns, which ultimately contributed to my own emotional abusive patterns. The fact of the matter is, if you are in or are contributing to being in an emotionally abusive relationship, it is very likely you were emotionally, physically, or sexually abused as a child. In this episode, we talk about how I am facing my inner child and addressing my unhealthy patterns.
The Light in My Shadow is a personal recovery journey through BPD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, and complex trauma. I educate and share techniques and practices of Ayurveda and yoga to address mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, highlighting the heavy issues hidden in the tissues. I realized that in order for me to change my life, to stop these patterns, I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and start taking action to be the kind of person that I want to be with. I am your host, Christina. I share my story and open up with no filter about my personal struggles, challenges, and successes. I want to preface that I am not a doctor as of this date, but I am an Ayurvedic health consultant practicing freely in the city of New Orleans. Therefore, everything that I discuss in these episodes are suggestions from an Ayurvedic and yogic application that have been working for me, and merely suggestions for you. You can learn more about my offerings at Jai Bhakti Yoga Foundation's website, jbyfnola.org, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook, or even subscribe on YouTube at jbyfnola. If you would like to support the mission of bringing holistic resources to individuals in mental, emotional, and physical hardship, please share, rate, and review this podcast with them. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome back to our 5th episode. Again, just to repeat it, episode 5, season 2 of how I am facing my inner child and addressing my unhealthy patterns. I'd like to open this up with that in the last episode, I touched on the following types of abuse from our childhood that you and I may have experienced. And the thing is that few people put up with emotional abuse as an adult unless they were abused as a child. And according to Dr. Engle, nearly every person who becomes emotionally abusive has a history of abuse in their childhood. So, which of these have you experienced? I basically can check off every single one of them, so I want to know if you're in that same boat. Number 1 is physical neglect. When a parent does not feed a child enough food or provide the basic necessities, such as clothing, shelter, or medical attention if needed. Number 2 is emotional neglect or deprivation. When parents don't take an interest in their child, do not talk or hold and hug their child, and are generally emotionally unavailable to their child. Alcoholic parents are often neglectful of their child's needs. Number 3 is physical abandonment. When a parent gives their child away to be raised by someone else, leaves them in the car or alone at home for long periods of time, or do not pick up a child at a designated time and place. Number 4 is verbal abuse, constantly putting a child down, name-calling, or being overly critical. Number 5 is boundary violation, not respecting a child's need for privacy, such as constantly walking in on a child in the bathroom without knocking, going through a child's private belongings as a regular habit, not as a way of monitoring a troubled child's behavior. Number 6 is emotional sexual abuse. When parents create an inappropriate bond with their child or use their child to meet his or her needs, her emotional needs, the relationship can easily become romanticized and sexualized. Then there's number 7, role reversal. when a parent expects the child to meet his or her needs to parent them. Number 8 is chaotic abuse, being raised in a family where there was very little stability, but instead constant upheaval and discord. Number 9 is social abuse, when parents directly or indirectly interfere with their child's access to his or her peers or fail to teach their child essential social skills. Number 10 is intellectual abuse, when a child's thinking is ridiculed or attacked and she or he is not allowed to differ from their parents' point of view. So in the last episode, I brought up the repetition compulsion and the unconscious drive to repeat the same type of abusive relationships I experienced as a child with the hopes of accomplishing a new outcome. I was trying so hard to undo the past that I ended up repeating the same shit over and over with different partners, resulting with the same outcome. Therefore, in order to change the future, I need to address the past presently. So let's take the example of emotionally unavailable. Each time you reached out to your parent for love, attention, comfort, etc., they consistently rebuffed you. They was too busy for you, too tired to attend to you. The more you persisted, the more they withdrew, ultimately calling you needy, becoming demanding, and ultimately they reject you. If you are male, you may have played out this rage by emotionally or physically abusing your partner. If you are female, you may have swallowed your rage and turned it inward against yourself, becoming deeply depressed in the process. I was recently in one of these relationships where my partner gaslit me the entire time, ultimately leaving me stating through a text when I confronted him that he was giving me space, not dismissing me. He wrote, "It's obvious I'm not at the capacity to give you what you want, nor am I trying to be vulnerable or attached to anyone. I feel as if I wasn't showing up for you, and that's not fair. I don't want you to feel less than anything in my life. I enjoyed our time together, but moving forward, it's probably just better off being over." This is from someone that literally love bombed the fuck out of me for the first month and a half of our relationship. And then immediately it was like bait and switch, like right after, and then became completely emotionally unavailable. And that really goes to show like we need to work on sustaining healthy boundaries and catching these red flags way early on. So in an effort to prevent this shit from happening again, where you get love bombed the hell out of and then fucked over completely, we're going to go through an exercise to make sure that this doesn't happen. So let's really strap on our bootstraps and grow the fuck up. Let's go. So I'm going to read through a questionnaire of 22 questions pertaining to your childhood history, and you are going to make a list of the negative ways you were viewed and treated by your parents or other significant caretakers. And if you've been following along in the episodes, these individuals are called the original abusers. So those are who we are going to be focusing on. On the second point, we're going to write about how you feel this affected your intimate relationships. So the first is making a list of the negative ways you were viewed and treated by your parents. And the second is write about how you feel this affected your intimate relationships. You can pause this at any time when I'm going through the questions if you need a little bit more time. But I'm just going to breeze through them quickly. And then I'm going to read over what those outcomes are so that you have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. And if you are in counseling, this is going to help you so much so that you can bring this to the attention of your counselor. So the first question is, did your mother tend to be distant or aloof towards you as a child? The second question is, was your mother unable to take care of you when you were an infant for any reason, like illness, absence, or death? Number 3, as a young child, were you adopted, placed in a foster home, or sent to live somewhere outside the family home? Number 4, did either of your parents die when you were a child? Number 5, did your parents divorce or separate when you were a child or an adolescent? Number 6, do you feel you were deprived of physical affection as a child? Number 7, do you feel that your emotional needs, such as being listened to, being encouraged, or being complimented, were not met as a child? Number 9, did your parents seem to be too busy to bother with you, too busy to teach you about life, ask about your homework, or talk to you about your feelings? So if you've answered yes to questions 1 through 5, then you've experienced abandonment as a child. Physical and emotional abandonment are beyond a doubt the most profound prerequisites for becoming both a victim and an abuser. Experiences of abandonment in childhood cause profound insecurities and fears and set you up to be insecure, jealous, possessive in your relationships. Now, if you've answered yes to questions 6 through 9, then you've experienced neglect as a child. A physically or emotionally neglected child grows up to either feel that his needs are unimportant or spends the rest of his life insisting that others meet the needs that were not met by his parents. So let's continue. Let's go now through 10 through 22. 10. Was one or both of your parents excessive drinkers or alcoholics, and or did either of your parents use drugs? Was one or both of your parents extremely critical or domineering? Did you find that it was difficult to please one or both of your parents, or did you get the impression that no matter what you did, your parents would never approve of you? Number 13, was either of your parents extremely possessive of you, not wanting you to have your own friends or activities outside the home? Number 14, did either of your parents treat you as a confidant or seek emotional comfort from you? Number 15, did either of your parents ever physically abuse you? Number 16, did a parent or other authority figure ever sexually abuse you? Number 17, was either of your parents emotionally incestuous with you, either by looking at you in a sexual way, asking you inappropriate sexual questions, walking around half dressed or naked in front of you, or expecting you to meet their emotional needs, such as taking the place of an absent partner? 18. Was a sibling ever emotionally incestuous or sexually abusive towards you? And number 19, did you ever run away from home? Number 20, did you ever feel so enraged with one or both of your parents or siblings that you seriously wanted to kill him or her? Number 21, did either of your parents or other caretakers physically abuse you in the following ways? Hit you so hard that you had cuts or bruises or were knocked off your feet, slam you up against a wall, or attempt to strangle you? And number 22, did either of your parents or a caretaker use an object to inflict pain on you, such as a belt, a stick, a knife, a cigarette, or other burning object? So now, if you answered yes to questions 10 through 14, you were emotionally abused as a child. A yes to question 10, and I'll repeat that one, was one or both of your parents excessive drinkers or alcoholics, and or did either of your parents use drugs, indicates that your parents were likely too preoccupied with alcohol or drugs to be available for you, or that there was chaos in the family caused by their alcohol or drug abuse. A yes to questions 11 through 12 indicate that you were overly criticized, dominated, or controlled by one or both of your parents. An affirmative to question 13 indicates one or both of your parents were or was overly possessive of you. This is the form of emotional abuse. A yes to question 14 indicates one of your parents saw you more as a parent or a partner than a child. If you answered yes to questions 15 through 18, In addition to being emotionally abused, you were either physically or sexually abused or subjected to emotional incest. And if you answered yes to questions 19 through 22, you were being physically abused and your home life was likely severely emotionally, physically, or sexually abusive. So now we go back and we make a list of those negative ways that you were viewed and treated by your parents, and then you're going to take some time to journal and write about how that made you feel. And this should help you for those of you that have a therapist or have an outlet that you're able to talk to somebody. So it's time to address those original abusers, like we said. Your original abuser is that person or those people who seem to have had the most influence on you with regard to how you behave in relationships. While you may have been emotionally, physically, or sexually abused by several different people when you were a child or adolescent, there are probably one or two of these abusers who stand out the most in your mind. An original abuser is not always the first person to have abused or neglected you, but the first person to have caused significant lasting damage to you by their abuse or neglect. So that's the exercise. That exercise time, as I mentioned in episode 1, is that we're utilizing the tools to improve our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being in an effort to support our recovery journey, which means it's going to take a lot of hard work, which is why we are starting with the superficial basics before getting into the deeper shit known as Ayurveda, which I will begin to pepper in. But first, the exercise. It's discovering your original abuser. So I'm going to ask you, if you need to go ahead and pause this episode and give yourself a moment to just take in what you just listened to. Write out all of those answers that you needed to answer. And then welcome on back. So the original abuser is that person or those people who have made the most influence on you with regard to how you behave. That dark time in your life that is hard to shake off. So this is the exercise, okay? On a piece of paper, you're going to make a vertical line down the center of the page. You're going to choose one of the abusers from your childhood and make a list of this person's characteristics. Using one half of the page, you're going to list the person's positive characteristics. And on the other half, you're going to list the negative. Then number 2, if you have more than one abuser, you're going to follow the same procedure for each person on a separate piece of paper. Then number 3, on another piece of paper, you're going to list the positive and negative characteristics of your current partner if you have one. And then you're going to compare the lists of your childhood abusers with the list you made of your current partner. Do you notice any similarities between these lists? And if you do, you're going to need to circle them. Now, number 5 is you're going to look to see if there is one childhood abuser who has many of the same characteristics as your current partner. And if so, this person is likely to be your original abuser. Now that we've addressed who our original abusers are, we need to look at how we are addressing our anger. According to Dr. Engle, men tend to look outside themselves first for the cause of the problem. Research has even revealed that this tendency is based partly on the male biological tendency to take action versus introspection, and partly on the male ego, which encourages him to blame others and not take responsibility for his actions. And boy, do we know that's true. But females aren't let off the hook here either. A female will tend to look inside herself for the cause of the problem. Most women are inclined to blame themselves for a problem, then blame someone else. Y'all remember when I quoted my friend Bailey, "It's not what's wrong with you, it's what's wrong with them"? Because women tend to turn their anger inward and blame themselves for problems in their relationships. they tend to become depressed and their self-esteem is lowered. This in turn causes women to become more dependent and less willing to risk rejection or abandonment if they were to stand up for themselves. Sound familiar? Men, on the other hand, defend by putting up a wall of nonchalant indifference, adding to an air of independence which adds to a woman's fear of rejection, causing her to want to reach out and achieve comfort and reconciliation. Again. Sounds familiar? Basically giving in and taking the blame, losing herself in the relationship just to feel loved and accepted by her partner, only to pay a heavy price in the end. And that is what I've experienced. And what I'd like for those of us growing through these patterns in our effort to break this cycle is to begin standing up for ourselves instead of always giving in to keep the peace. It's far healthier to stand up for your needs, your opinions, and your beliefs. And in doing so, you'll protect your peace. So now that you are aware of how you behave based on the environment and circumstances, along with myself, the relationship and the root cause of where this behavior is occurring, you and I can now take back our power and yet again, like I said before, protect your peace. It's time to recognize the red flags from the jump and do not dismiss them for the sake of saving something that isn't worth saving, like I learned from someone that ended up becoming emotionally unavailable for me. It's going to hurt and it's going to suck, but you are going to be all right. You are going to be better without that person because you have saved yourself and them from a tremendous amount of pain. This is where the true healing begins, y'all. I've provided some resources for all of us to see as I start and continue our healing journey along with you all, with a physical exercise known as yoga, the sun salutations, and a guided meditation to help us along. I'm sharing this because it's what's been helping me, and I'm praying that it helps you too. I've recognized that the patterns that I have been creating are the things that I've been creating on my own accord. And now that I'm finally recognizing this and I'm addressing what happened in my past and the original abusers, when I did that exercise, it was really, really easy for me to recognize the patterns in all of my past relationships that I've had and recognize who the most powerful emotional abuser or original abuser was. And so I want to share that this is a journey that's ongoing. And we're going to get through it together. And we're going to be all right. So until the next episode, in the show notes, I've provided some recommended films for you, as well as some recommended books, along with the yoga asanas that I told you about. And I've also shared with you the meditation, which is under the free JBY yoga class on YouTube. So you can catch all of the classes that I offer and all the meditations there, which are free. And then my blog, which is on jbyfnola.org. So I want to thank you for showing up for yourself as well, for your loved one, if you're listening. It means so much to me that you took the time to do this. I want to invite you to join my community. If you've listened this far and like what you've heard, you can reach out to me personally at Jai Bhakti Yoga at any of those platforms on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and email jaibhaktiyoga@gmail.com. Also, please do share this podcast, rate this podcast, review it, and please do continue to support by sharing it with your community so we can provide holistic care to our loved ones. And as always, I'm Christina, so much love, your host of The Light in My Shadow, and I will see you in the next episode. Namaste, and be well.